Welcome to In the News for September 17th, 2021. I am Brett Birdie from appsandlaw.com.
Hey, Brett, this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hello, everybody.
Good morning, and wow, we've got a little bit to talk about today.
Lots of Apple announcements, yes.
We teased this last week because on Tuesday of this past week, what was that, the 14th, that Apple had an Apple event. And we thought we knew some of the things they were going to talk about, and we were right on some of those. But there's a couple of things that we were not correct on.
You were right on some.
You did a good job.
Some,
yeah, you did a good job covering a bunch of this stuff, and we can get to it. But how about we'll take some time to talk about the two big announcements, and one that we did expect, and the other one that we really didn't expect. You did a good job linking to some good coverage of the iPhone 13 that was announced. In fact, you did a good blog post about this as well, like you normally do. Why lawyers will love the iPhone 13.
Indeed. I think, the big thing for me about the iPhone 13 is it's an incremental improvement over the iPhone 12. There was a time in years past where Apple would indicate those sort of the S models, it would be the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12S. They haven't done that in the last few years, and I think they've moved beyond that. I think they're just doing numbers now, but that's when this one feels like. So last year's iPhone 12 was a brand new design. It has the flat sort of edge to it and stuff, which I really love. It's so easy to hold in your hand. It's a great device. Really one of my, of course, almost every year I say it's my favorite iPhone ever, but last year it was
this was a good one, right?
It was a good one. So now the iPhone 13 this year takes all that goodness and just adds to it. And I think the thing that's going to really appeal to a lot of professional users, attorneys, and otherwise is, the better battery life. They managed to squeeze a larger battery in there and then do some efficiency things with their processors so that for some of the models, you get an extra hour and a half, which is great. And for some of the models, you get an extra 2.5 hours. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, which already had ridiculous battery life, to have an extra 2.5 hours. What are you going to do? Go all month with that thing? It's very impressive. And so for a lot of people who use their devices a lot, they're going to love that. But also some serious improvements to the camera as well. We'll have to try it to see. But I know enough about photography to know that it's all about the light. Right. That's why you can get much better pictures outside on a sunny day than, in a dark bar at night. And they say that all the new models of iPhone introduce almost 50% more light because the camera is just a little bit bigger and they've changed it. So that could make a big deal. And then the Pro models make it even better. So if you like the camera, if you like battery life, and plus you get everything else that was good about the iPhone 12, that's a pretty good combination.
It is. And I have seen, just like you have and many others, there are some headlines floating around that a lot of people were not as happy with these announcements for the exact reasons that you just described. People thought of it as just incremental. Like, I know last week we talked about two things we can always bet on, that it's going to be a faster phone and it's going to have a better camera, right? We always know that Apple's going to improve those things, and then sort of anything else that they do is a little bit of a gravy on top. But some people have said this isn't that big of a deal. Maybe if you had the 12, it's not enough to really push you into upgrading, although some, I know, obviously a lot of people will be upgrading to the iPhone 13. And a couple of those things that you're talking about, there was a better processor in there. The A15, it just seems like Apple is continuing to double down on that. It's a better camera, and like you already talked about, two of the fancy phrases that they came out with. One was the cinematic mode, which I'm very excited to talk about. It's like you see this in movies where if it moves focus from one thing to another thing, or one person to something in the background to the foreground, that kind of a thing, and it'll be doing that automatically, which is great. And then the macro photography, I think you talked about that in your post here as well. Where you can get really close onto something, and that's, like you said, we gotta try it out to see exactly how it feels. But I know I've heard some other filmmakers and photographers talk about this already, that they're already pretty excited about what this is going to bring.
Yeah, the cinematic mode was funny. Brett and I were texting each other while the live announcement was happening. And when we both saw cinematic mode, we were both texting each other, oh my goodness, look at this. And, that's the sort of thing that you're not going to use every day, much like you're not going to use the portrait photography feature, which has been around for a little while, every day. But there are some times when it could make your videos look a lot more professional and interesting. And, so again, we'll see how it works in real life. And it's neat that not only does it do it in real time, it automatically changes focus. And the example Apple showed was a character who turns his head to look at another character. And as the person in the foreground turns his head, the focus automatically shifts to the person in the background. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. But you could even after the fact go back and adjust it if it didn't work the way that you liked it. So that's really cool. And I tell you, macro photography is something, again, you don't do macro photography every day, but we've all been in a situation where you come across a cool flower or a cool bug or something like that. And you try to get your phone as close as possible. And of course, if you get too close, it does blurs and focuses, but you can, it's always been that with a really nice camera, with a macro lens, you can get some amazing photographs. Now we can do some of that stuff with our iPhone too. So it's just it's a little feature, but it's fun to add that macro feature is only on the Pro model. But so they're nice improvements. Yeah. And I also say, the first thing that you start off, Brett, by saying that, there are some people on the internet that are, they're nonplussed about the iPhone.
Right.
Not every new iPhone is going to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
But when you look back over time at the improvements, it's incredible how far we've come. And although there are some people that get a new iPhone every year, and I tend to do that just because I'm a tech nut.
Guilty as well.
For folks that wait every 2 or 3 years to update, I mean, the reality is you get huge improvements. So, if you had last year's iPhone, this is an incremental change. But if you had anything earlier than last year's iPhone, you're going to get when you get this new device, you're going to be like, wow, look at all the changes, everything from the 12, everything from the 13. So, I'm happy with, let's Apple do slow and steady. Every once in a while, we'll have big changes, but always keep pushing the ball forward and making it better. This is a fantastic iPhone that people are going to get a ton of work done with. They're going to love using it for entertainment. They're going to love using it for photographs. We didn't even mention that the Pro model gets this new ProVision, the new screen that's, much like the iPad screens.
ProMotion, right?
ProMotion, thank you. Yeah. It can update the screen much faster, 120 hertz. The idea is that it just updates it so quickly that you don't even see it happening. It's almost like it's just happening in real time. And so these things just make it more, and again, it's not going to change your life that you have, that on it, ProMotion, but it's going to make it more seamless. Apple likes to use the word, more buttery, it's smooth as butter as you're moving it, but it makes for a much more pleasant experience. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a great phone.
I think somebody was describing it to me like if you're reading a website and you scroll, you flick your finger and then you watch it kind of scroll up as it goes. But somebody was trying to describe it to me that with ProMotion, potentially, I guess, is that it literally is going to be scrolling in real time. Like you're not going to be waiting for it to scroll. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to go. We don't know yet until we see it, but it just seems to me that that's going to be interesting. Yeah. I was also thinking maybe something else we should list to something we can always count on that the next phone is going to be faster, better camera is there's probably going to be a new color, right? What was this here? I mean, there's always red and there's typically like, a black and a white one and maybe a gold, but what was the new, Starlight, right? The Starlight color.
I didn't even know that Starlight was a color. I thought that was a phenomenon when you have light from a star.
Right.
So Apple has invented a new name. In some product pictures, it looks silver. In some, it's white. I've heard some people say, and I think this is true, that when you look at it in person, it's sort of silver with a hint of gold in it. But it's
interesting. Starlight.
Most people will just refer to this as the white phone, but it's not the same white. There's different shades of white, and it's an interesting shade of white. And likewise, Apple is always coming up with crazy names for the black phone. Sometimes it's the new one this year is Midnight, but sometimes it's Graphite, which they have the Pro. Space Gray they've used in past years, and different space grays would mean different things for different models. So it's all marketing. But the nice thing is that there is a big variety. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 5 different colors of the iPhone 13 and 13 mini. There's 4 for the Pro. So you can express yourself however you want. I ordered one this morning. I just got the black one, the graphite one, because that's just what I've always liked.
No Starlight for you.
No Starlight for me. But if you want some color in your life, or if you need some Starlight in your life, you can get that now.
One other thing, you linked to another story here, which I found interesting, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this yet, but I think we will, is the notch, right? Yeah. The notch on the screen is apparently getting a little smaller. And in fact, this was a great article from Michael Simon at Macworld, where he put it side by side, right? Like this on the left side is the current notch that we have in the screen of the iPhone 12. And then the right side is what the new notch the 13 notch is going to look like. To me, it's smaller. And Apple did talk about this a little bit in the event, right, Jeff? That, they've been able to make it a little bit smaller. Some of us, I think, were hoping that it would kind of go away completely and it would be seamless, but that's going to be maybe 14, maybe later. That's really hard to do. But this notch is smaller. I call it pudgier. To me, it is smaller, but it's a little taller, right?
It's a tiny bit taller. Right. It's definitely, side to side less. When the first iPhone had the notch, which I guess was the iPhone 10, right? Because that was the first one with the full screen and with the full screen
button, Face ID, right?
At first it was like, oh my goodness, this is so bizarre to have a notch at the top. And of course, nowadays I never see it. I never see it at all. And which is why even with a smaller notch on the new one, my guess is that I will notice the difference on like the first day. And then after that, I won't notice again. And as you say, eventually Apple will get rid of the notch completely. But it's nice that they're, things are getting smaller. And so they're taking advantage of it. I heard one person speculate that the reason they could make the notch smaller was that the camera, although more powerful, is actually a smaller physical hardware device, so the notch could get smaller. One other thing I wanted to mention about the iPhone 13 before we move off of it, and this was something new that came out last year, or not new, but it was one of the differences last year was that the Pro model, which costs about $200 more, gives you the telephoto lens, that third lens in the back. And if you take a lot of pictures, I really like having that telephoto lens, getting closer. To the action, whether I'm taking a picture of my kids doing something, I use it a lot. And so this new 13, not only does it have the telephoto lens, but instead of being 2x, or last year with the Pro Max, it was 2.5x. This one's now 3x. So, going from 2 to 3 is one more, sort of to quote the movie. But so, I mean, it's going to get even closer to the action. And of course, as you zoom in more with a device that you hold in your hand and you can shake, I hope that 3x isn't too much of a good thing in that you can really see the shakiness a lot more for videos and for pictures. But I'm sure that Apple took this into play. But if Apple, if you hold your hand really still, you can get a closer picture. That's a great thing. So I was already a fan of the telephoto. I really can't wait to try out the 3x telephoto.
Yeah, there was another great article. You linked to several of these, obviously, as we go, but there were some things. What was this? Other things that wasn't really talked about a whole lot. And just real quick, one of the last things here was this double SIM support. I haven't heard too much about this, but apparently maybe phones would be able to go on 2 different cellular carriers or maybe switch over. Not sure yet. Yeah, go ahead.
So the deal is, traditionally our cell phones would have a SIM card in it, that physical little card, sort of like a tiny SD card, and that would control how it communicates with your carrier. And a number of years ago, they came up with the ability to have 2 SIM cards so you could switch carriers. And then they also had, one of them was an electronic SIM card, which means it's not a card at all. Okay. It's just the idea that you could tell your phone, I want you to now communicate with this new carrier, and it would do it. And so the new phone, and a lot of people who travel internationally love this feature because they could use AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, whatever in the United States, and then they could, without actually changing a card, they could switch over to an eSIM when they go to Europe or wherever else, and then switch back when they get home. So that way you're not paying the roaming rates for international and stuff like that. So the new iPhone 13 can have 2 eSIMs, which is really the ultimate convenience. You never have to worry about a physical card at all. So if your carrier supports it, you can just, tell your iPhone and it just does it. Here in the United States, you use one carrier. In some other country, you use another one. And so again, this is not a feature that I've done, but for the jet setters out there that are doing a lot of international travel, they know exactly what it means to have 2 eSIMs, and they're going to be excited about it. So, doesn't make a difference for me, but it's going to be a feature that others will really enjoy.
Most everybody anticipated, of course, that Apple was going to announce a new iPhone. We didn't know the exact details and what number that it was, or 12S or 13, and we got all of that. But even before they talked about the iPhone, Tim Cook was on the virtual stage, as it were, and just threw everybody a little bit of a curveball. Now, you wrote about this on iPhone JD, a brand new iPad mini. Yes. We kind of thought that maybe they would a little bit talk about iPads, but everybody was like, well, they're going to wait till maybe, next March or so, just the way that it goes. And all of a sudden this came out of left field and everybody was just going nuts. But I am personally pretty excited. I thought you did a very well-balanced article here, Jeff, because I know you and I know you're not as excited about the mini size. On the other hand, you are also talking about, hey, there could be some pretty amazing uses as maybe even like a secondary iPad on there, which I know sounds crazy, but we're getting to that point.
Yeah, the iPad mini, I mean, the version that came out with this week, the 6th generation, it is incredibly impressive. The mini has been
Right.
around in one form or another for about 9 years, and it has often been seen as the tiny and less expensive device. And many people really prefer something this small because it's so easy to carry around. You could easily slip it in a coat pocket or something like
Right.
that. But over the time, sometimes the mini has been a little bit less powerful. This one they came out with this week, I mean, it is really powerful. It includes the same chip that's in the brand new iPhone 13. Now, I saw something after I wrote the post that you're showing right now that was I mean, nobody has these in their hands yet, except for reviewers, which haven't started posting their reviews yet.
Right.
But some speculation through some ways that they were able to figure it out that this one might be a clocked down version of the chip. So maybe it's not exactly as fast as the iPhone 13, but it's close enough. And I really think that this may end up being the fastest iPad on the market besides the iPad Pro. So you've got, it's sort of like, in some ways the best of both worlds. It's really small, which some people love, and it's really powerful. So you can get all of your work done. What a great combination that is for many people. The only downside is it means that it's not that low price. There was a time, when the very first iPad mini came out, it was only $329.
That's right.
And so to have an iPad closer to that 300 price point, it's almost an impulse buy for some people. Whereas nowadays, it's either 500 or a little bit more than 600 if you get the extra memory on it. So it's, you're paying more money for it. I mean, you can't have everything in life. You can't have all the power plus have it free. Wouldn't that be nice? So, but if you're willing to pay for it, it is a powerful device. And, I was just talking to somebody in my office yesterday who told me that she instantly purchased the iPad mini because she loves having an iPad that she can fit in her purse, even a small purse, maybe not a clutch purse or anything bigger than that. And I mean, you can get so much done with this. The iPad mini and the iPhone Pro Max are close to each other. It's the same idea. You want a nice size screen. So do you get the biggest iPhone or do you get the smallest iPad? And I have to admit, I did not order one yet. I don't know that I will, but I am lusting after it because I had that first generation iPad mini.
Same.
And I loved how small it was to carry around. And it was so nice. And back then we didn't have the big iPad Pros. So I had a regular size iPad and an iPad mini. And I would often travel and have both of them. And I'd be in a hotel room and I'd have my mini next to me with like my email or looking at a contract or something like that. And my regular size iPad, you're writing a brief. Now that I have the iPad Pro, it's got a big enough screen that I can do dual screen and I can do all that on one screen. But when you're just sort of sitting on your couch, just playing around with the internet, looking at websites, reading some email, this tiny little thing, it is so, I mean, you look at the pictures of what it looks like in your hand, or if you've had an iPad mini before, you know how small it is. I pointed out in my post, it's like the size of a 5x7 photograph. I mean,
that was good.
I like small that. And this is a really, really good looking product. And one last thing I'll say about it is I love that this exists because from an outsider, it has sometimes seemed like Apple had a love-hate relationship with the mini. They came out with it, they updated it, and then they did nothing with it for like 4 years. And then last year, or 2 years ago, rather, in 2019, they updated it again. And we were saying, yay, they're still interested in the mini. That's so fantastic. And then it sort of sat there for 2 years. And now it's, like I said, it's incredibly powerful. So if you love this form factor, this was the big announcement this week for those who like it. And even for people like me that don't use an iPad mini, gosh, it's something. Well, it would be fun.
I think you and I are on the same boat. I think I had the second generation iPad mini and I loved it. And I remember I used to take my regular iPad at the time, the regular size, and I would have the mini. People would say, well, like, why are you carrying around both? And at the time I was doing a lot of presentations, it just made sense because I used it exactly the way you're talking about for, the iPad mini was doing different things. And I had it as almost like a reference aspect in a way for things that I was reading or something. Then I used the other iPad for a lot more, I guess, of the serious kind of a stuff. But I sold that iPad mini and I haven't had a need for a new iPad mini. But now, like you, I am lusting after this new iPad mini. And I think, again, it's back to the same thing where I was several years ago. This would not be my primary iPad, I guess is the way I think about it.
Right.
I would still do the 12.9 iPad Pro. I would still have my regular size iPad Pro because that is so powerful. I do presentations from that. I can do work on it just like you're talking about. The split screen works fantastic. But Jeff, it just is keep itching on the back of my brain. It's like, this iPad mini would be a perfect thing for sitting next to my desk. And I'll tell you two things quickly where I used to use this: reading Kindle books or or iBooks.
Right.
I love doing that on the iPad mini better than on my iPhone, even though today that's probably what I use, and certainly better than a full-size iPad. And the second thing that I am very excited about is we've talked about the quick notes aspect for the notes application that's coming out for iPad OS 15, and how you just take a little, exactly. You just take a little pencil and you swipe it up from the corner and it brings up that note. I've been seeing myself using an iPad mini next to me on the desk and having that Apple Pencil, because by the way, you point out in here, the second generation Apple Pencil works with the iPad mini now, the new iPad mini that's going to be coming out. And it's like, that would just be great to have to take my notes on, exactly the picture that you're showing here. I almost think of it as like this way. I have a yellow legal pad on my desk somewhere. Usually I don't have a reference, but I do have one available that I can reach out and grab. But I also have a small little stack of Post-it notes. So if I just need to jot something down, that's what I'll grab instead of the yellow legal pad. In my mind, that's the way I've sort of been justifying the fact that I might have to order one, because I got my regular size iPad and I have the iPad mini, and they're not a replacement or either or. It's just they have a couple of different uses. And that was my impression on this and why I got excited about it.
I think that's a good analogy. Maybe even better than the Post-it note would be like a small little steno pad, or just something that's so tiny to hold in your
like
hand.
a moleskin or something.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
And, the thing is, as the world is, I mean, we're still dealing with the Delta variant, but, as eventually people are starting to travel more and more, and people that do that as a part of their business, when you're traveling, you're going to want to have a big screen, whether it's a laptop or an iPad Pro. But like, if you're just sitting there in the airport or on a plane, something like the mini, which weighs so little in your hand's not going to get tired holding it.
One-handed.
You can one-handed,
you can palm it.
Is a lot to say it. And since it's so fast, you could, although you'd have to squint a little bit, you could do your work and go through your documents and type your brief and everything else. You really could do it. So for some people, this is going to be a perfect device. Maybe, maybe for some people, even a good primary device, but a fantastic accessory, a fantastic secondary device. Really impressive.
You linked to this great article, and we're big fans of John Voorhees. Maybe we should invite him on as a guest or something, really. Because he's just great about what he does. But he had this great little post in here that you linked to on MacStories about the updates. But I think I may have missed this other story he had done, maybe not even a year ago, maybe about over a year ago, where he was talking about how he still uses the iPad mini, and it's the older version in his work. And he was talking about some of the similar things. He's actually a practicing lawyer, apparently, or mostly, I know we just know him from MacStories, or I do. But it's just amazing. He was talking about how he calls it a downtime iPad for the things that you're talking about, right? It's something that he can grab quickly if he wants to watch a video, or if he wants to just, play a quick game on it. It's like it's bigger screen than an iPhone, but not as bulky maybe as the iPad Pro. And typically it's easy to jot down a note or something on there. And again, here's a great little picture I thought from that post that he had on there. But I just, I relate to a lot of what he was talking about in this other post about exactly what you and I are talking about. Like, to me, this isn't going to be my only one and only iPad. This would be my iPad Extra. But I got a bunch of yellow legal pads around. Now, they don't cost, $500, but it's like, to me, this would be the way that I would just be having access to all the information that I need. And it would just be, I would pick it up. It would be easy to pick up and grab, and I could palm it and use it for something quickly that I need to check in, as opposed to like getting out my entire iPad. Because I find if I go to my iPad Pro, I'm typically also getting out the keyboard with it. Right. Just because I'm either going to reply to an email, it's more of a replacement for my laptop. Right. But this iPad mini, you could have a keyboard. It'll work with a keyboard. But that's when I would typically probably use the second generation Apple Pencil, or I would just be, tapping stories just to read through things on there.
Yeah. And, another advantage of it being so powerful is not only can you do so much with it today, but it's going to have a lasting power. It's always nice to buy a product when they really do a boost on the power, right, because that way, you can hold on to it for 2, 3, 4 years, and it's still going to be pretty good through that entire time frame. So again, for folks trying to justify this, what is it? You take $500, you spread it out over 4 years. Hey, it's almost free.
I had that iPad mini of mine. Like I said, mine was a second generation, I think. I probably easily had it for 5, 6 years. Yeah. And it just, it kind of those last, I remember 6 or 7, 8 months, it was just sitting in the closet. And I'm like, I'm going to sell this to somebody that can really use it, and they loved it. So a couple of other things quickly, just so that people know, this doesn't have a Touch ID button, a circle button like usual, because the screen is a little bit wider, but they have now incorporated the Touch ID button into the on-off button at the very top, which I think the iPad Air does right now.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that's one thing. And the second thing that I like to point out to folks is that Apple did change the bottom connector, right? Most of the other old iPad minis and some of the older iPads still have the Lightning connector, which is what we still have for the iPhone. And by the way, iPhone 13 is still a Lightning connector as well. But this iPad mini now has a USB-C connector, correct? Which is similar to what the iPad Pros have.
And the iPad Air that came out last year too. So, I mean, they're moving towards
That's right. Okay.
USB-C is really Apple's new connector for the iPad. The exception being the other new iPad that was announced this week, which we're not going to talk about, is just the regular iPad, the low end one.
The 10.2, the iPad normal, iPad regular, iPad nothing.
It doesn't really have enough of the power for me, but it's really cheap. And so schools might buy, 100 of these.
Yeah.
And for them, it actually is an advantage that it keeps the Lightning connector, because they probably have these charging stands for Lightning that they've already got. And this just can swap right in. So it might be more of a burden for people with a whole bunch of them. So there is a new, if you really can't spend much more than $300 or $400 on an iPad, there is that entry level iPad, but it's the
better
iPad
than
mini.
Nothing.
It's better than nothing. But the iPad mini is the thing that's really, I think the impressive announcement for this week.
I did find it interesting quickly on that, like that's sort of like the bottom, I hate to call it the bottom rung iPad, but if I go to iPad.com, you can see here's the iPad Pro, iPad Air, iPad nothing, and then the iPad mini, right? Just iPad on there. So we have like 4 different family versions of this now. And the iPad Pro, of course, has 2 different sizes on there. But it was interesting quickly that when Apple was talking about the improvements to that iPad nothing normal, that they had a major focus on the education. It was almost like they were trying to say, this is your education model, because it's exactly what you were saying. It's really for schools. They even have a discount for schools now. So it's not something that I would, just like you wrote about this too. I wouldn't recommend this for a professional that wants to use one of an iPad in an actual profession, a day-to-day practice. But it is, it's great. It'd be great for the kids. It does everything it needs to really do for the kids, and certainly for any school or educational purposes. Yeah. So that's good. All right. I don't know if we need to say anything else. You had another great link to 9to5mac.com, where I kind of agree with this. Who was this? Ben Lovejoy, great writer. He basically said the iPad mini star of the show. Like that was really the thing. And I don't know if that was because we didn't expect it. And so people were excited about it, or are people really going to get as excited about the iPad mini as you and I have just been talking about? But, there was a lot more that, of course, that Apple talked about. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But I thought this was a good article that you talked to here. Oh, and one thing quickly, last thing here, Center Stage is going to be on the iPad mini too, right? Yeah. That was, I haven't used it. I don't know if you've had a chance to use it very much with your new iPad Pro, but the fact that that's going to be on the new iPad mini, the Center Stage, I haven't had a chance to play with that, but that's the technology that will basically follow you in a camera. Like if you're on a Zoom call or a FaceTime call, it'll follow you. Or if somebody else comes into the picture, it'll follow them as well.
Yeah, they can just set the iPad mini just like some of the other iPads on a table. And even if you walk back and forth in your kitchen as you're having a conversation with your parents, the camera will sort of, appear to follow you. Of course, the camera doesn't really follow you, but it crops into a wide view to make it look like it follows you. So it's a pretty cool effect.
I like how Ben says this. He goes, this redesign of the iPad mini takes it back to when it was launched, a super cute consumer gadget.
Yeah, but it's more than I actually disagree with that statement, because it's not just a gadget because it's so powerful.
Right.
I understand where he's coming from with that it sort of gets back to what gets back to the roots. So great device.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so why don't we do just a quick run through of the grab bag of everything else quickly, because those are the 2 big things. And that, if you really needed to know something from this week, the iPhone 13 and the iPad mini, along with, the iPad nothing. But a couple of other things quickly, however you want to jump into this. I found this to be really interesting that there's the Find My, or there's a MagSafe Wallet now that includes the Find My integration. So if you lose just the wallet, you can now be able to track that down somewhere. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a practical reason for that too, because some people are concerned that if they magnetically attach one of these Apple wallets to the back of their phone, and if it becomes detached and it falls down somewhere,
Right,
you've
'cause
suddenly
it's
lost your wallet
magnetized.
with your money and your credit cards and stuff like that. And so this there's sort of two ways Find My can work. The more sophisticated way is if you have integrated circuitry, either because it's built in for something like an iPhone,
Right.
or you have an AirTag so that it sort of actively knows where it is. This wallet doesn't have an AirTag built in. That the wallet would be huge if it did, but it has the more simple version of Find My, which AirPods also use, which is simply that it knows where it was last seen. So if it comes detached from your iPhone, it can tell you this thing was last attached to your iPhone in the Starbucks around the corner. And so then you can be like, oh,
Right.
I must have dropped it in the Starbucks. You go back to
Right.
the Starbucks and hopefully somebody
Right.
turned it in and it's there so that's still a useful feature. And I love that Apple is continuing. I think Find My is a cool technology to know where people are, to know where objects are. So it's great to see this built into the wallet.
Absolutely. All right, something else that Apple really spent a good amount of time on, and you've talked about this a little bit, is Apple Fitness Plus, really, which is really more of a service, right? But Apple, they've hired these professional trainers. You subscribe to Apple Fitness Plus, and you can basically pick whatever kind of workout that you want to do. I know you've been doing this, and you've really enjoyed it as well, Jeff.
Yeah, I do. I do it almost every day, and I like it. It was fun during the keynote this week to actually see a couple of the coaches from Fitness Plus appear and get some screen time so everybody could see them. I feel like these people are my friends because I watch them on TV almost every night or on my phone as I'm doing workouts.
Right.
But so Apple improved the service this week. They brought it to more countries. They've added some new workouts to it. And so that's great. One of the many things I like about Fitness Plus is there are so many different workouts in it. So when I started, I was just using the treadmill, but then I started doing things. So what I've been doing a lot lately is high intensity interval training, HIIT, which is not something that I had ever done. I mean, people do that all the time. People have been doing it since the 80s.
My wife's been doing
jazzercise and stuff, but I just had never done it because I wasn't going to go to a gym and be working out in front of other people. But when I can do it in the comfort of my own home, sure. And so now I'm sort of gotten into it. So, and likewise, I had never done yoga before. My wife is into it. So like we had a yoga mat and stuff. But since it was right there in Fitness Plus, I'm like, sure, I'll try some yoga. Now, unlike the HIIT training, the yoga stuff, I decided was not for me. I'm not really flexible enough for it. But it's nice that you could just try out all these different things. And so you're showing on the screen right there that they have the Pilates is coming to Apple
if you don't
TV
like
Plus.
yoga, maybe try Pilates.
I've never done Pilates before in my life, but I will. Why not give it a shot? I've got nothing to lose. So
it looks like yoga, but with more sweat. So I don't know. But you could try that out.
Yoga with more sweat.
In a similar vein, they added guided meditation. They really have been doing some great stuff with this. What was that? The walks with celebrities.
Time to walk, which you can take a walk and have a celebrity.
It really
talk
sounds
to you,
amazing.
Like Dolly Parton or something. That's neat. Another feature they're adding to Fitness Plus is they are adding the ability to work out with multiple people at once, which is sort of interesting because Apple has something that is coming as a part of iOS 15 and the other technologies on Monday, the name of which is slipping my mind right now, but it allows multiple people to watch a movie at the same time. We talked about this a couple episodes ago.
AirShare, I think. Yeah.
Or SharePlay or something like that.
That's right.
SharePlay. And so the idea is you start watching a Netflix movie, or maybe not Netflix, but an Apple TV Plus movie, and they start and you're synced up so that you can actually sort of see each other in the corner of your screen and talk while you watch. But Apple made it clear that technology was not just for watching video. It could also be used for any app. And so they have incorporated it into Fitness Plus, and this will be coming out later this year, I presume, so that while you are working out and doing, your Pilates workout or your whatever workout, your HIIT workout, you could have up to, I think it's 32 other people that you're connected to in sort of like a FaceTime call, so that you can be talking to, encouraging, cheering on your friends as you do your workout or do your bike or do your treadmill. And so for people that really like going to a gym and get the enthusiasm of other people working out with them, that sounds great. For people like me that don't want anybody seeing them while they sweat, I will not be asking Brett to join me for a workout.
Yeah, you texted me like, don't ask to share your screen while.
Yes. But whatever. I mean, I'm
okay with
definitely
that.
not the target audience for Fitness Plus. I use it far less intensely than other people do. So, for some people, that's going to be a fun feature. And, it's a thing that there are other services like, the Pelotons and the other things out there.
Right.
There's a number of these services, and some of them have integrated, you can see your trainer live, or you can see other people live. So sure, I love it that Apple is making the service even better. Between the Apple Watch, which I know there was a new Apple Watch this week, but we're going to wait till next week to talk about that on the podcast. With the Apple Watch and with fitness, Apple is getting into health in a big way. And so, of course, it makes perfect sense that they would improve the fitness app. So bravo, the Fitness Plus service. So that's great.
Yeah. Just quickly on that Fitness Plus service, something that I picked up on is they said it several times, like now you can be part of the largest gym group, right? Or gym club. Like, I just like the way they were positioning it. It was very subtle, but I kind of got that similar to what you were talking about. You don't want to get out of I don't want to drive across town and go to a gym and sign in and all that kind of stuff and have everybody. But if I can do it in the comfort of my home, but still have other people around and compete against other people in a spinning class or whatever. Not that I do that, but I'm just saying that they really kind of were pushing that, like, this is now the biggest fitness club that you can be part of. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting and neat. But you mentioned the Apple Watch. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but I almost think it was more interesting now that I've kind of reflected on it, what Apple didn't mention about the new Apple Watch. They announced the Apple Watch Series 7, because the current one is Series 6. They talked about how great it is. It's going to be dust resistant. It's a bigger face. But then they stopped. We didn't get a time or a date when they were going to release it. We didn't really get a specifics about much more other than just like the fancy stuff. I don't know. That was my impression. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, you and I had been talking even last week on this podcast about a number of the rumors about the Apple announcement. And there were rumors of things like integration of satellite technology into the iPhone. We didn't see that. At least we don't think we did, unless it's in there. They didn't tell us. And some of the other rumors are out there. There was a rumor that Apple was delayed on the Apple Watch. And it turns out that rumor was true, that it's not, I mean, normally I think Apple would have announced the Apple Watch and it would have gone on sale. You could have pre-ordered it this morning and you would have gotten it next week.
Exactly.
But for whatever reason, they're putting it off a little bit. We all know that there's been a worldwide chip shortage for a number of reasons, but because of COVID and other stuff. So whatever the reason is, I feel like the Apple Watch is the one thing we know what Apple told us about it, but we don't know all the details. And so we'll see. But
I was reading somebody, and people are prone to do this about any Apple event. They really look for whatever is there, but they noticed that there were people in the event, because it was all pre-recorded, but there were people, executives in the event wearing the Apple Watch, but it wasn't on, it wasn't activated, or they were trying to point out like there was something quirky about it. So anyway, that just fuels all kinds of the Twitterverse rumors and stuff like that about what's going to happen. Like you said, we got the information that Apple wanted us to have, but then they stopped there. At least they know enough that they were ready to announce it. And there's a lot of people excited about this. And even as you talked about down here, this is another story from MacStories that, it's just integrating better into the fitness aspect. I mean, I think there's like fall detection for bikes improved. There's e-bike support, which I don't even know what that means exactly, but at least they're improving even on the fitness side. So I'm excited about it. We'll talk about that more next time, because like you said, you're going to write about it. So stay tuned to iPhoneJD.com, because I know you will be writing about that.
Perhaps one thing that's interesting about the Apple Watch, without getting into the details of it, is that Apple chose to announce it this week, even though it wasn't really ready. Because one of the things I always wonder is Apple going to have another announcement this year? They had 3 of them last year, I think. And if they do have another announcement, what are they going to announce? Because they certainly could have saved the Apple Watch to announce later. Are they going to have another announcement this year? I suspect that they will, if for no other reason, to announce new Macs. But another one of the rumor mill items that did not come true is a lot of people thought we would see new AirPods this week.
Yes.
Not only because people thought that it was time for an upgrade, but the AirPods really seem to go with the iPhone. So it seems like it would make sense, if you're going to announce AirPods in the fall of 2021, to do it at the same time that you announce the new iPhone. But Apple chose not to do it. So does that mean there are no new AirPods? Or does it mean that Apple's just going to announce them when we have a Mac event later this year?
Right.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. But that was right. Everybody was banging on that rumor and betting on that rumor that we were going to get some kind of a new AirPod or announcement, and nothing. Complete silence. One other last thing quickly that I just noticed on here in other Apple events, when we talk about Apple talks about iPhone, they've always had a feature or a few minutes that they devoted to augmented reality, the AR, because all the phones, at least the Pro models and the iPads, have this LiDAR technology, and it had AR. There was nothing zilch about that, and I don't know. Obviously, that was a choice Apple made, but I don't know. Like, do they realize people aren't talking about that as much or as excited? Who knows? I just thought it was an interesting point because in previous events they've always had a section where they've talked about that AR, and they just didn't even mention it this last time. So
yeah,
interesting. We'll see what happens.
The video that I linked to at the end of my post today, it's Justine is here, was interviewing Apple CEO Tim Cook, and it's a cute little interview. It's worth watching. But she actually asked him about AR, and he did give the party line that Apple continues to be interested in AR, and she threw out some examples of where we might be going with AR, and Tim Cook did not really take the bait because he didn't want to preview anything that they're really working on. Instead, he talked in more general terms that, of course, we continue to be interested in AR. But yeah, because Apple loves to talk about it so much, the fact that they didn't talk about it this week, I think there was a reason for it, like you say. Don't know what that reason is. Maybe 6 months from now, we'll see. Now that's now we know why they didn't talk about it in September of 2021. We'll see. So put that one on the shelf for now.
A few bonuses. I loved your first paragraph here. I just thought that this was so sweet. Thank you for writing about this. I know we've talked about our first computers ever that we have ever had as humans, and mine was the Radio Shack TRS-80, but yours was that Sinclair, and apparently Sir Clive Sinclair passed away this past week. This was just yesterday, a nice little. Yeah, a nice tribute that you put in there. Thank you for adding that. I thought
there were so many pioneers of the computer industry in the 1970s and 1980s. And of course, we all know Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who started Apple with him. But there were so many others. I mean, Nolan Bushnell, who started Atari, and then later Chuck E. Cheese. And some people, you had like the Steve Jobs model of the people that were, frankly, brilliant, but crazy and would aggravate people. And the guy that started Commodore computers when I moved on to a Commodore. I'm trying to think
Commodore
of
64.
I'm blanking out on the name of it was Jack Trammell, who started Commodore and then later took over Atari. He was an entrepreneur, but then he also drove some people crazy. But Clive Sinclair was someone who always he was much like a Steve Wozniak in that he was a tinkerer. He used to push the envelope, but was a perfect gentleman, as I understand. Of course, I never knew him myself. And in the 1980s, it was interesting because unlike today, where everybody has a computer in their office and, parents would have computers and kids have computers, computers were new. The idea of a personal computer was sort of revolutionary. People that would spend more parents that would spend more money would get like an Apple II computer. But for people like me, that I was just a kid interested in a computer, I wasn't going to convince my parents to spend $1,000, or more for an Apple II. But for something that cost $100, like a Sinclair ZX81, and they would get it for me almost as a toy, knowing that it was sort of an educational toy, and I could add to it over the years. But there were so many people like me that were, whether you're using the Sinclair, or there was an American version of the Timex Sinclair, or whether you're using the TRS-80 or some of the early Apple Atari 400, there were all these, the VIC-20, there were all these basic computers. Well, basic because they were simple, but basic because also they ran basic.
That's what we programmed.
That they started like a whole generation of people into the computer industry. And, for example, just yesterday, I saw Elon Musk, who, of course, has Tesla and SpaceX and everything else, was talking about how, fondly he remembers his Sinclair computer from the 1980s. So, a tribute to, and it wasn't just the Sinclair computer. Clive Sinclair was always coming up with interesting innovations. And some of them were successful, like the Sinclair computers. Some of them not so much. He put much of his Sinclair money he put into an electric vehicle. And when I say an electric vehicle, I don't mean something that looks like a Tesla. You're showing a picture now. It looks almost more like a scooter that you sit in.
Yes, right.
He lost tons of money on this thing. It didn't go anywhere. He put a lot of money into a very small television that the size of the screen was tiny. Here. Oh, there you go. There's a picture of it. And it didn't go anywhere either. But the ideas that he could see in the 80s, I mean, a very small television that you carry around with you, That's the iPhone, right? I mean, you're
Yeah,
watching video
absolutely.
on it. You know, electronic cars so that you're not running on gas. That's Tesla and everybody else with their electronic vehicles.
Absolutely.
So he was ahead of his time, you know, too much too to make some money off of it. And then some things he was right at the right place at the right time, like the Sinclair, but he was always pushing the envelope and coming up with brilliant ideas. So again, we think of people like Steve Jobs as a perfect example of that because he had so much success over his life, but there were many other pioneers in the 80s. So, you know, a tip of the hat to
that's beautiful, Jeff.
Sir Clive Sinclair. Thanks
for mentioning
some great stuff and was very influential on people like me.
Here's another story you linked to, and I had seen this as well. I just thought this was a little fascinating,
isn't it? Yeah,
because it's not the newest. You know, it's not the first, but I guess for whatever reason, people picked up on this. The newspaper in Chattanooga, Tennessee, basically said, "We're done with physical printing." Right? I mean, I guess they're still going to have some, or maybe on Sundays, whatever it is, but not only are they going full digital, which, by the way, for anybody, my father was in the newspaper business, and it's like, you know, we have all switched that everything on the back end is all digital anyway, right? I mean, my dad was the old day where you would have to wax a picture and paste it down, but everything's digital anyway. Then they would print it. Well, now it just goes straight to digital. But I think what was interesting about this story, didn't they mention that the newspaper is giving iPads to people, to subscribers, right? So it's not just that they're all digital. It's like, hey, we're not going to send you a paper every day, but we're going to send you an iPad, and that's how you're going to read the newspaper every day. I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in the midst of this transition from paper to digital, as you say, for a long time. But this one did just strike me as a cute story because they were actually giving people the iPads. They had no excuse not to read their newspaper and continue their subscription because they can open it up every morning and read the paper on their iPad.
I just have to show quickly, this is one of the things when I give a presentation, sometimes I talk about this, because as opposed to Visionary, the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, this, I like the story, and obviously I like the vision about it. But one of the scenes quickly I talk about, Tom Cruise, he's being chased now. He jumps into a train, and the camera pans over this person sitting, looking at Tom Cruise, but he's reading what is obviously a USA Today newspaper. It's flexible. It feels and looks like a newspaper. But in the next scene, as the news changes and Tom Cruise is still sitting there on the subway, the newspaper changes. In other words, to me, this is where we're going to go. This is something I've always dreamed of. It's like one day it's going to be like carrying around a newspaper, but it's pretty much going to be an iPad. So I don't know if you've seen the Minority Report. It's a very short little section in this, but I picked up on it just because I've always thought that's where we're going. And when I saw that story from Chattanooga Free Press, I just thought, okay, that's going to happen. We're getting closer now, and Tom Cruise is not going to be the bad guy anymore.
And we have that today, right? Because I mean, every time I look at the Washington Post or the New York Times or my local newspaper on my iPad, it's always different every time I load it, much like Minority Report, because something, as news changes throughout the day, there's a different story. So, you know, it's almost like there is no canonical, this is the newspaper today. It's constantly changing throughout the day.
Fantastic. Okay, last little quick bonus, because I saw this too, and it was funny for a couple of reasons. Apple actually put out a warning, which is fairly unlike Apple to do this, right? But they said, we would recommend that you don't mount your iPhone to a motorcycle. And the reasoning was a little weird, but apparently the vibrations can affect over time, can affect the iPhone's ability to take pictures. Just a little bit odd that Apple would even announce this. But what was even weirder is that in the Apple event, they actually showed somebody riding it was a scooter, but it was over rough terrain, and they had an iPhone with them. So it's almost like people were like, wait a minute, didn't Apple just say don't do that? And then in the movie they did that. Of course, that was planned a long time ago, but it's just a little odd that this story came out this past week.
Either the left hand and the right hand didn't know what each other were doing, or Apple knew they were about to show this crazy video of someone with an iPhone on it, and they wanted to issue the warning, well, do not try this at home.
Right. Okay, so now that's our PSA for the day, right? Don't mount your iPhone, put it in a pocket or something similar. Apparently, it's just on the mounting that they say. Which, by the way, I think this is a RAM mount that they have there, which I don't even know if they have RAM mounts, but I love it. I still use a RAM mount in my car. It's one of those you stick to the windshield, and then it has a scissor function in it. Anyway, just
those get excellent reviews.
Yeah. Okay, so in the know, a couple of tips. First of all, one of the things that Apple didn't dwell on in the event, but it came out after the fact, you already mentioned it, Jeff, that apparently what we have been waiting for will happen on Monday, September 20th. iOS 15 along with iPadOS 15, will finally be released. And I am very happy. I haven't been running iOS 15 on my phone, but I have been running iPadOS 15 on my iPad Pro, and I cannot wait for it to be official. I love it. I'm taking more and more advantages of all the little small kind of details like that. So my quick tip was, if you know that iPad or iOS 15 is going to be released on Monday, are you going to be ready for it? And I've got a couple of different sites here. I wish there was an easy way to go, and maybe, Jeff, you know about an easier way. But first and foremost, if you go, I finally got to it. If you go to apple.com/iOS, you can scroll all the way down to the very, very bottom of this page, and it now has the list of all of the iPhone models that will be compatible with iOS 15.
Yeah,
really,
just
what
to
you
pause
need
on
to
that,
know,
it looks like you go back to what the SE. I'm sorry, you're about to say this.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. Like the iPod Touch apparently is still in there too, but the iPhone SE or the iPhone 6S. So Apple is usually very good about making sure that they are backwards compatible with a good number of the older models. But if you've got an iPhone 5, it's probably time to upgrade just for the sake of, especially if you use it every day, if it's that important. You mentioned that earlier today.
Yeah, but iPhone
Jeff,
6S was released in 2015. So that's pretty good to go back.
Not bad.
6 years of iPhones can run the latest and greatest. That's pretty good.
Right. So similar, if you go to apple.com/iPadOS and you scroll all the way to the very bottom of that page, I'll have the links in the show notes so you can look at this too. But if you want to make sure that your Apple iPad is compatible or ready for iPadOS 15, here we finally are. You can go all the way down the bottom of this screen. And so the iPad Air 2 is the earliest version. So most of the time, even the iPad minis are in there, iPad mini 4 and everything as well. Again, good number of backwards compatible devices on there. But if you just wanted to be sure, that's where that is. My tip really comes in this, Jeff, that when I talk to a lot of people, they show me their iPad or their iPhone and they say, I don't know what I have, right? How do I find out? Well, it's just interesting because Apple has both a model number and they have a model name. What we're looking at right here are pretty much the model names, right? If you say, I have an iPhone 11, that's the model name. But actually, Apple has model numbers that correspond to that. And the reason that there are different is that the iPhone 11 could have a different model number based on whether it's AT&T or Verizon or whether it's, what size that it is. It's a little confusing, I know, but the best way to find out what you have today is to open up your settings app in iPhone or iPad, go to the general section of your settings, and at the very top, you'll see About. And if you tap on About, this is where you can get some useful information. Here's the Apple support page here. You can get your iPhone's name and what version of software or the iOS that you're currently running. And most of the newer models will tell you the model name as well as the model number. And if you have that model number, you can just Google that number. It usually starts with an A, or some of the older ones start with a couple of other different letters. But you can just take that number and you can Google it. Or Yahoo or Bing it or something, and it'll tell you exactly what kind of an iPhone that you have. But most of the time, that model name will tell you iPhone 11 or iPad Air. It'll tell you enough information to know if you're going to be in these two lists here. So get ready for iOS 15, and that's my tip on making sure that you know what version or what model iPhone or iPad that you have.
Good tip.
Yes,
my tip is one on, now that we have all the new Apple products announced this week, how do you buy them? And I will tell you, as someone who's been purchasing many Apple products for many, many years, my number one tip is the Apple Store app. Now, I'm not talking about the App Store app, which is how you download third-party apps or even some Apple apps. I'm talking about the Apple Store app, which is basically a store in an app on your iPhone. So just like you might walk into, your local mall and find your local Apple store, if you're lucky enough to live in a city that has one, the Apple Store app is a great way to purchase products. And it's the reason that I like the app is everything's right there. I find it easier to navigate the app than even the Apple website. For a while, Apple didn't even have a store link on a website. Now they do. They just added that recently. So at the very top left of the website, you can see the word store. I always find it much easier to navigate the app, but I also find it much easier to purchase items within the app. And the epitome of that was this week. Did you use it this week? Did you buy something this week? You know, I'm about to say
I didn't buy anything, but I'm totally with you. I'm totally on board with this app. Here's what they did this week,
which I loved. Again, not many people like me are crazy enough that they're going to order the new product the second that it comes out, but that's who I am. And so often what would happen is, Apple would say, we're going to, like this morning, for example, they announced that they were going to start taking pre-orders for the brand new iPhone at 5 a.m. Pacific time, which was 7 a.m. where I live in the Central Time Zone.
Right.
So in years past at 6:59, I would be refreshing the app and jumping in so that I can very quickly start putting my order in. And because I wanted to be one of the first ones, I would be moving quickly, and I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake and choose the wrong one. And the next thing I know, I've got a purple Mini instead of the Black Pro. But this year, Apple made it so much easier because you could go into the Apple Store app ahead of time and you can configure everything. So I was able to go in, choose the model that I want very calmly, choose the color that I want. I could even choose accessories. So I decided to get a case, even though I almost didn't get a case this time because I don't use my case a lot, but I decided to get a case anyway. And then, but you could go more than that. I could, double check my delivery address, decide what kind of payment I wanted to use. It asks me, do you want to trade in an iPhone? And I said, yes, I'm going to trade in my iPhone 12. Which of course was the iPhone I was using, and Apple knows that. It's like, is this the one you want to trade in? I'm like, you got it. So they said, great, we'll trade it in. We'll port over your phone number from your old iPhone. So it was everything short of clicking the buy button. So this morning at 7 o'clock, I opened up the app and I opened it up and it says, okay, everything's ready. Click the button to buy it. I'm like, okay, great. So I clicked the button. It did a little Face ID thing. And I was done. So this was great. And so not only is the Apple Store the easiest way, but now it's great but again, what I just described is it's only going to happen when you buy things, the day that they come out. But even if you're buying things at some other time, the Apple Store app is really great. It knows what you have. It knows your prior purchases. It helps you upgrade it. It helps you pick products. It is the only reason that I would ever not use the Apple Store app is sometimes I prefer to buy things on Amazon for various reasons. So if you're going to, and fortunately nowadays you can find most Apple products on Amazon. So if you're going to go to Amazon, great. If you want to go to a physical store to actually see something in person, great. But with those two exceptions, the Apple Store app is on your iPhone or your iPad is the way that I recommend purchasing Apple products.
100% agree, because again, similar to what you just mentioned, it remembers all of the other devices that I've already connected with through my iCloud account. And so it recognizes, hey, you want to upgrade this? Are you ready to do a new MacBook? And it's like, here's what you had before. I love having all of that in one place. Second thing, quickly, just like you said, it'll track the order. Like I can go back into that app and see exactly what I had ordered, when it's going to be delivered. I get the notifications. It's just seamless the way that it works. And the last thing quickly that I love is using Apple Pay with the Apple Card. This is the way I buy everything from Apple now, because you can pay, the entire price if you want to. But with the Apple Card, they typically will allow you to spread out the payments over, a year or 6 months or whatever the case may be without any interest. I just love how everything works so seamlessly together. But you're right. The experience is amazing.
Yeah. And I purchased it using my Apple Card, not my other credit card, because when you purchase Apple products, if you happen to use the Apple credit card, you get like 3% back as opposed to 1% or 2%. So, it's basically paying for itself, Brett, really, when you consider it all. That's what I'm going to try to tell my wife, is to justify it.
I love it. I think that's great. Anyway, that's like mega tips of the Apple Store. But yeah, it is the Apple Store app, not the App Store app. Like you said, a lot of people get a little confused, and Apple could probably do a little bit of a better job naming that, but is the Apple Store app. And I just tell you quickly, I had breakfast with a friend, and we went across the street to the Apple Store yesterday morning. And it was funny because he was asking questions about configuring like a Mac Mini, and the Apple Store employee in the physical store said, well, the best place is just go online and you can configure it yourself. And that's it. I pulled out my Apple Store app on my phone, or I could have just jumped on one of the, hundreds of computers that were there in the store. But that's the easiest way. Even the Apple Store, physical Apple Store employees will tell you that's the best way to do anything on there.
And because they don't work on commission, they can be honest and tell you that,
Absolutely.
And not try to upsell you and get you to buy right there. They don't care. As long as you're a happy customer, it doesn't cost them anything.
Exactly.
So,
All right, Jeff, thanks as always. This was fun. I knew we were going to talk a lot about
Lots to
what's
talk
going
about
on
this
with
week.
the Apple event. All right, but there'll be even more next week, I'm sure. So we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.